Noah Clemens, of everyone who reads this must converse. You tagged me for the eclectic reader tag. And I'm not sure why the fuck you did that, because I got things to do tonight. But, it seems like it'd be rude not to respond. I started watching yours and I got bored. No offense. But, it was number 3, how have your tastes changed over time? And that's where I'm going to start. How has my taste changed over time? It hasn't. I mean, once I grew up, once I became an adult and started reading great fiction and history, that's what I still read. Great fiction and history. My tastes haven't changed over time. The reading I've done has changed because new books come out, and that's that. So my tastes haven't changed over time. Can I stop now? Nah, I gotta go to number 1. Where do you get your recommendations? I don't need to go anywhere to get recommendations. I still haven't read a lot of things that I've not yet read. I've read The Idiot halfway through twice. I loved it, and I had to stop both times. Brothers Karamazov. I knew I had to read that when I was in university. But I'll tell you one interesting thing about what I read is that the path that I set off on began largely through a history class about United States foreign policy since World War II. And it was a seminar with 2 historians teaching it. And through them, I began reading Henry Miller, Celine, and that set me off on Latin American literature as well. I don't remember specifically. Maybe they suggested 100 Years of Solitude. But, just by reading and finding out about others, I guess probably the New York Review of Books was a big influence. But, any place where people talk about books is good, but I don't come across many writers that I haven't heard of, except for, new writers who are writing in writing great literary works. And so I don't think there's really an answer for that. Nobody ever calls me and says, "Hey, Rick, you got to read this one." I people like Gaddis, you come to know of Gaddis by being a reader. I'm also a writer, and books are a big part of my life. I'm also a very political person, and I need to know my history. And I think, how do you decide what to read next? Well, I usually can't afford to buy a lot of books. I don't have good bookstores here in Slovenia that sell a great number of English books, but there are 2 ways that I determine what I need to read. One is, it depends on what I'm writing. A lot of times I need to, like for instance, for The Manifold Destiny of Eddie Vegas, I read a lot of mountain man literature. The Adventures of Hugh Glass, number 1 among them. And I gave that to you, Noah. I'm not just talking to Noah, but, he better be watching. I'm holding this up, so if it's uncomfortable for you to watch, just, turn away and listen. I had to do that with this one teacher I had, a philosophy guy, ugly motherfucker, and but really clever, smart, and funny. So I just put my head down, or just look away, and and I got some great stuff out of that class. But if you want to do that, feel free. How do I decide what to read next? One thing, like I said, is what I'm reading, but I'm always reading at least 10 books at a time, which is why I still haven't finished Carlyle's um, French Revolution. Fantastic book, fantastic writing, haven't finished it. And yet, at the same time, I've read and reread much of uh, the Mediterranean during the age of Philip II or whatever. But Brauddel's masterpiece in history, which I would consider one of the top 10 books I've ever read, um, I read that. I read in that repeatedly, and I like to read different um, history. It's enough if you just want to keep up on the evil perpetrated by the United States in the world. Um, you if you want to read all the stuff that you should be reading, you should know. You should read 10 books at least on the Vietnam War, and then that just maybe you want to read William Appleman Williams' groundbreaking history that delineates the imperial style of the United States. But you also want to read things that are going on now, and that'll keep you busy. You won't have time for anything else. So I cannot keep up with the depredations of the United States government, but I try to do my best to stay with it while I read fiction. And it helps if I'm writing, like in the assassination of Olaf Palme, I was writing stuff that none of you know about, probably, because the historians in the United States have not written about it, but it's, if you want to know what it is, look up the Gladio, look up Gladio. That's the Italian name for this secret program. This is not conspiratorial bullshit. This is primary Cold War strategic spy stuff that was hidden until 1991 when the Prime Minister of Italy announced it openly, and you should look up that. But the few books that concentrate on the Gladio phenomenon are written by European historians, and a guy named Ganser is good. He's got a pretty good primer, I suppose you would call it. I've not read a good overall book, so I wrote one. Um, but it's fiction, but a lot of it isn't. And so that's that. And then once in a while I get a little extra money and think, okay, I can order something. And yeah, I now I order from Amazon Germany because that's the quickest way to get something, and they have most of what I want. What you meet people who know a lot about books. So, well, one place to get recommendations is Chris Via's channel, but every week you'll get a book, and you won't be able to keep up. So Stephen Moore's book, My Back Pages, which is put out by Zerogram, which is putting out my book, The Manifold Destiny of Eddie Vegas, which I chose to read recently because they're buying it, and I wanted to make sure that it was a clean copy. And also, I want to point out that the Mountain Man Hugh Glass is the guy that The Revenant was supposedly about, but The Revenant is a movie filled with bullshit. And my book has a better, it's fiction, but in The Manifold Destiny of Eddie Vegas, I read about Hugh Glass because I wanted to use the bear attack. And my guy, you get a much more entertaining and realistic take on it. Why was the guy so upset? They took his gun. A mountain man needs his rifle. That's what pissed off Hugh Glass. Am I digressing enough for this? How has my taste changed over time? Well, I reached puberty, and then I reached mental puberty. Both were late, but once that happened, my taste didn't change. So, enough of that. Genres. I will read detective novels, but I'm very demanding. I can't stand garbage detective novels. I want the good stuff. Raymond Chandler is pretty good. Dashiell Hammett was pretty good. Uh, this guy Craig McDonald by the Times Books is pretty good. Um, David Peace is brilliant. I guess you could call this crime fiction as well. Um, and the movie Chinatown is great. But I haven't found a lot of really great authors, except in the literary detective genre. And the latest one that was really fucking great was by Joao Hazen, and I published it as the chief editor of Corona Samizdat Books. His is called Bedraggling Grandma with Russian Snow, and that fits the genre. And the last question was, give 5 genres and examples. Well, I'll just give you examples. The genre of literature. Um, Alvaro Mutis. I saw that Noah mentioned um, Atomic Aztecs by Seshu Foster. It's another one. Um, I think that probably if you haven't read Rabelais and Kafka, um, you're in deep shit. And I also recommend reading Finnegan's Wake. You will read Ulysses, or you will, and Moby Dick, and you will say, I don't know, well, they're not all they're cracked up to be. Well, they are. They are. They are all they're cracked up to be, and more. But Finnegan's Wake is even better. That is a book that should be read by every student of literature and every writer who's lucky enough to be able to read English and Slovene, because there's Slovene in there too. Every language is probably in there somewhere or another, but it's a very funny book, and it's a book of extraordinary genius as well. So those are books you need to read, and for history, Carlyle's History of the French Revolution for the language, Braudel for the genius, and I think if I'm not done by now, I probably should be, but I would say, uh, what makes an eclectic reader? What else do you read? Okay, so I'm adding number 10 is what makes you an eclectic reader, if you are one? What else do you read? Well, I've read a ton of Indian fiction and philosophy. So I've read much of the Mahabharata and the Upanishads, but I've read a lot about Indian philosophy. Other things that make me an eclectic reader. Um, I wish I could remember. Oh, I read the Sadist about the Dusseldorf killer in the 1930s. That was that you'd have to add that to your list of strange things that you pick up and read. I guess what makes you an eclectic reader is you'll read anything that strikes you as a damn good book, and that there are damn good books everywhere. I don't like science fiction, and so uh, I haven't read much, but I read Ursula Le Guin's The Dispossessed, and it made me want to be a physicist. That was a great book. So I think I don't know if you could get me to read fantasy, But I think I think like people who read Tolkien are giving way too much back to their deprived and maybe depraved childhood. But that's just me. I've never read any of that shit. But other genres, just read them out. Romance, and what is romance? A good fuck book? Well, Henry Miller, romance. Some of him. This book here by Chandler Broussard, um, uh, The Wolf Leaps, published by Corona Samizdat. I'm going to tie into what books do you read next? I forgot about one thing. As the chief editor of Corona Samizdat, it's my place to read the books that we publish, but I like to read them after we publish them. So this came out in late August, and I just finished it. It's an extremely good book. Broussard is the vanished man of the late 20th century, one of the best writers there in the United States, and he just, I don't know, major fuck job by the literary establishment, and Stephen Moore couldn't even get people to read him, and except me. I came across Broussard by reading My Back Pages by Stephen Moore. But so that brings up another way that I choose to read books. Once we print a book, like the latest one, besides this, is Zach Tanner's science fiction, sort of, and sex novel, sort of. So it's a science fiction romance, maybe, but it's much more than that. It's philosophical, and it's called Oscar Submerges, and I'm reading that along with Blood Meridian, a reread, and shit, I don't even remember a Bernhardt book called Extinction, um, Ligotti's book, the the world is shit and everybody hates you, or something like that. And E.M. Choron, as the French call him, Choran or Choran, but the Romanian aphoristic philosopher, his book is called The Trouble with Being Born, the one that I'm reading. And that's just a blast, It's like Finnegan's Wake, it's for the bathroom, You could just open it to any page and you'll be laughing in no time. Through your tears? Nah, I don't know. When you're my age, if you're not pessimistic about the human condition, you just haven't been looking around. So there, I'm gonna tag, anybody who watches this. You're tagged.